Right, so in this lesson I want to give you a little bit of the background to Gulliver's Travels. And I'll talk a little bit about Jonathan Swift, the author, about satire, which is the major literary idea that I want you to take from this reading, and then just a little bit about Gulliver's Travels itself. And finally I'll connect it to the project. Right, so Jonathan Swift was born in 1667, died in 1745, so the later part of the Renaissance and into the Enlightenment period, right? And he was born of Ireland, of English Anglican parents. And this was at a time when England and Ireland were, the relationship between the two countries was very tense for political and religious reasons, right? I mean, Ireland was a Catholic nation, England was Anglican, Protestant, right? And England had, taken over a lot of Ireland, and so kind of a nasty time in the history of, these two peoples. And, Swift's family itself kind of experienced the same thing, right? I mean, they had conflicts with the English government, because his family had been involved in the English Civil War, which you should have studied in your history class. And also his writing itself was kind of offensive to the government. They just generally didn't like him, particularly Queen Anne. And it seems like Swift had a great sympathy for the Irish. He was a member of both cultures, right? I mean, he was English by background, and his parents were Anglican. But at the same time, he grew up in Ireland. How could he not, kind of feel a strong bond to that place and those people? Eventually at the end of his life, he became the Dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin. It's a kind of interesting man that he's both a professional writer of writing that is often kind of dirty, and not dirty in the sexual way, but dirty in this kind of the fart jokes way, but also a religious leader. And Swift is probably best known for his satire, so we should understand what satire is. Right? It's a literary form, and we can get satire in poetry, prose, or drama. We can get it in film, too. And it often exaggerates people's tendencies to make people laugh as a form of protest, kind of exaggerate the things we don't like about someone or some group of people, and then people laugh at them, and, that's a way of showing the ridiculousness of it. Now, students often ask about parody, right? Parody is silly. Parody is fun. We're not going to look at parodies in this course, but parody doesn't usually have that larger social purpose that satire does. So, parody is kind of for kids. Satire is more the grown-up stuff. But again, it has to do with using humor as a weapon. And so it's a more enlightened form of sarcasm. And it can be subtle or blatant, and sometimes it is serious, but usually satire is pretty funny. So some examples of satire from our culture, right? Shows like The Daily Show, or The Chappelle Show. One of my favorite sketches on Chappelle Show is a parody, it's kind of a satirical look at Cribs, and he, makes us see how ridiculous the rich people on Cribs are, and the way they show off. For example, he has this example of a pterodactyl or a Tyrannosaurus Rex egg. The movie Idiocracy, I'd love to show it in class if I could, but it's pretty R-rated. So, if you don't mind watching R-rated movies, I think Idiocracy is one of the best satires we have right now. South Park can be satirical at times. Sometimes it's just goofy and silly. So, yes, South Park can be satirical, but not always. So, you kind of have to watch South Park carefully to realize, oh, yeah, they're actually making social protest, or, yeah, they're just making fart jokes right now. And here's how satire works, right? So we've got literal satire that looks and feels and seems just like realistic art, but little things are exaggerated to show how ridiculous they are. Often literal satire gets taken as serious literature, and then people, get really upset about it, and then it kind of like, oh, no, they were just being satirical. Oh, okay. Versus unrealistic satire. And we're going to read Gulliver's Travels, which is very unrealistic. We're going to look at these talking horses in Gulliver's Travel. That's, clearly a fantastic place in an unrealistic setting. But unrealistic satire often serves as a metaphor for the world we live in. So we see, talking horses and these animal things. Oh, they're really talking about us. George Orwell's Animal Farm is another example of kind of unrealistic satire. And this really works well because when people laugh, they're just more relaxed and they're willing to engage with a speaker or artist, right? When you preach to people, they tune you out. I mean, every parent, every teacher, every teenager knows that. As soon as you start preaching to a teenager, they tune you out. So if you can get people to laugh, they'll listen, right? Humor is very important. Also, especially when we're dealing with unrealistic satire, when people see things that aren't them, but who do the same things that they do, they can often look at those things much more objectively, right? Again, if you preach to people, they'll tune you out, but if they see someone doing something awful, and it's kind of the same thing they're doing, they might just think, I better stop doing that. Alright, so let's turn our attention to Gulliver's Travels now. And Gulliver's Travels is a travel narrative. It's written in prose. And it's about a man named Lemuel Gulliver, who goes to 4 different places, right? He goes to Lilliput, the land of the small people. He goes to Brobdingnag, the land of the giants. He goes to Laputa, the land of the scientists. And finally he goes to the land of the Houyhnhnms, who are these talking horses who have more reason than men. Right? Lilliput is probably the one you're familiar with. Usually when people think about Gulliver's Travels, it's the Lilliput scene. And in that, it's actually a section, it's not just a scene, but in that section, Swift really makes fun of people's pettiness, how just small-minded, small-spirited people can be. For example, one famous scene, 2 political parties fight furiously over which end of an egg should be cracked first. Whether you should crack eggs on the big end or the little end. And what Swift is actually making fun of there is actually the Protestant Reformation. Kind of pointing out that, look, you're all supposed to be Christians here. Why would you fight so mercilessly about this or that? Just making a big joke on people. The voyage to Brobdingnag is where, Gulliver is the midget, and he's in this land of giants. And he kind of uses it to show us just how disgusting people are. He'll talk about hairs that grow out of people's moles and how they're as big around as, boat cables, and just how bad the giants smell. He's really just making fun of the human body. The voyage to Laputa, and a lot of scholars point out that perhaps this is Spanish slang and not nice Spanish slang, is the land of the scientists. And the scientists are so busy with all their big brain imaginary stuff that their wives just go astray on them. He's kind of making fun of people who live too much in the intellectual world and not enough in the real world. But our focus in our reading will be on part 4, the land of the Houyhnhnms. He's got this land of talking horses. And in the part that the horses seem very wise and very just and very reasonable, and what he's kind of joking about is that the horses are more reasonable and enlightened than human beings, right? He's really taking shots at the Enlightenment and saying, look, you're just not that great. I mean, this is we're going to see this in a lot in the literature of the Enlightenment period, is that Enlightenment thinkers kind of pointed their finger right back at Europe and said, you guys really aren't that great. And eventually Gulliver comes to identify with the horses and not the Yahoos, who are a race of humanish creatures who have all of humanity's worst qualities. They're violent, promiscuous, greedy, gluttonous, they're just filthy. I mean, the Yahoos are everything that is bad about human beings. And Swift uses this as an opportunity to ask us questions about what a human really is, and what an animal is, and if human beings are really all that great. I mean, humans kind of get into this sense of, we're the most important animal on the planet, and the most powerful animal on the planet. And traditional Christian thought holds that, humanity is the most special part of creation. Swift is asking us questions about this, right? If humans are so great, why do they rape? Why do they steal? Why do they murder so much? That's part of Swift's purpose for Gulliver's Travels. And so once again, this connects to the project, right? And Swift shows us that slavery and racism and genocide, and he really asks us questions about all of them, although in this case, it's the horses with their perfect reason, the so smart horses who end up committing slavery and racism and genocide. And again, he asks us these questions about the Enlightenment and really the idea of what it means to be civilized and who is civilized. Right? In this period of history, as Europe becomes very rich and powerful and starts to make contact with the rest of the world, they're obsessed with this idea of civilization and pointing out how uncivilized everyone else is. It really could be that the Houyhnhnms, these horses, are Europeans themselves. And in the end, like a lot of the Enlightenment thinkers, especially the ones we're going to study, Swift realized that Europe just needed to be more humble. And so that's it. Good job. And I've provided a read-along for Gulliver's Travels in a different video, and it's just me reading the text. It's pretty challenging reading, and so I'm going to give you a read-along to help you with that. And as you read and as you study, be prepared to write about satirical episodes in the selections from the book that I've given you. Like a metaphor, what is the tenor and what is the vehicle, and what is Swift's purpose for satire? Right, the Houyhnhnms kind of serve as the vehicle, the tenor being human life itself. So keep an eye on that and be ready to write about it.